Alright, good morning guys. So I've been asked to show some of the settings, the audio settings that are available in the AVIN. You'll have to forgive me with the audio quality throughout this video. I'm just using basically a point and shoot Sony RX100, so the audio is going to be coming from the camera. But moving forward into this, what I wanted to show is basically how I set up my radio for audio settings within the equalizer, within the advanced audio settings. And if you have an AVIN, if you haven't already noticed, obviously there are two equalizers that you can adjust, and I'll go into show you both options real quick. We'll navigate through here. We'll start with the radio SD, USB, basically all these functions right here, these primary functions that are available with the radio, the stock audio players. Have this, if we go into it here real quick. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. You have this, got a Follow Boy on here right now. You got this equalizer over here that's available. And again, this is available in the SD card, the USB, the radio. And you can adjust this accordingly, however you want. What I do is I adjust it as flat. And I'll mess with the filters here just ever so slightly. The low filter I have up to 100. And that's so I'm getting that low pass filter for my speakers here within the car. It doesn't affect the subwoofer. The thing that's going to affect the subwoofer, the filter, is going to be in the other audio settings. The only thing that I really adjust in this equalizer is the low pass filter. I leave both my mid and high filter turned all the way down, or turned all the way up rather, so I'm getting the entire range of frequencies there. And then this is the only place where I can adjust the subwoofer levels. And this is something I hope that gets updated in a future revision for the other equalizer. And I'll explain that in just a bit. It's also the only place where I can adjust the fade and balance is within this equalizer. And so what I'm explaining right now is this equalizer. If I go into the settings here for the radio, and you have to forgive me if I'm shaking, it's 24 degrees out here right now. I am freezing. But if we're here in the settings page and we go to sound, now we have the second sound adjustment here, the equalizer manager. This is a variant, it might be the actual version of Viper for Android. It's a pretty powerful sound adjuster. If you've rooted your phone in the past, you've probably seen something like this, or seen this exact sound adjuster within your various Android devices. This is really cool, and this is where I do the majority of my sound adjustments. Like I said, I leave the other equalizer flat, and the reason I do that, I'll come back to this in just a minute. The reason I do that is because when I go into my other audio players that I have, my apps, like I have songs, I have Google Play Music here, I also have Spotify, I have Pandora as well. Within all these apps, I cannot adjust that equalizer that's available in SD. And that could be a pain, mainly because of the subwoofer. If I want to turn it down for a particular genre of music I'm listening to, I can't do that unless I've preset it already in the radio or SD. Because if I go from my Google Play Music, let's say, over to SD, it's obviously going to stop my music and start playing whatever's I had last on the SD card. So again, I'm hoping in a later version of the AVIN updates or what have you, or the Viper for Android, that we're able to adjust the subwoofer levels within both equalizers, as well as the fade and balance. That would be ideal. But for now, to get around that, what I do is I just leave that equalizer within SD and radio flat, kind of get my subwoofer levels where I want them, pretty much average throughout. And then obviously I'm not going to mess with the fade or balance ever. It's just it has a good sound dynamic that's set up pretty nice as far as the sound here. And to explain my speakers setup the way I have it right now, I have the stage 1 from Bavarian Sound, Bavarian Audio. And I also have an Infinity Basslink subwoofer in the back that's located directly above, it's on top of the battery tray. And I have that secured back there. I'll maybe get a video or a picture of that here shortly. So if I go back here into the settings and go to the sound advanced audio settings. So to explain some of these settings, I guess this was the bulk of the questions that I had gotten. How do I adjust this? What needs to be adjusted? What can I turn on? What can I turn off? Obviously the top button, it's basically going to allow you to adjust all this stuff. You turn that off, nothing else below it works, so that's always on. And I do enable the equalizer. I do adjust it in here. It is customized. You do have a variety of different settings. If you go in and you see these presets, you have your usual variety of presets that you've probably seen before. Alright, and we're back. The little lady came to make sure I hadn't frozen to death out here in this cold weather, so a little pause there. So again, going back to the equalizer here, I have it customized based on a particular profile that I like. Knowing the speakers that I have and knowing the subwoofer that I have, the setup that I have, you can kind of look at this curve here, and I have the curve kind of adjusted higher towards the vocal treble side to get the most out of my acoustics. And the bass is slightly up. I have some dips down here in the mid range here a little bit. Some of the deeper vocals I have turned down. What I'm looking for is a profile that allows the highest amount of vocals. And not so much the bass, because the bass, again, I'm going to get from the subwoofer. I get some mid bass here from the door speakers, from the panel deck speakers in the back. So that's tweaked up just ever so slightly, but the majority of my curve range, again, is going to be towards the upper mid to the high treble range, and that allows for the best vocals. Again, that's for me. I listen to a wide genre of music. You wouldn't believe it. I listen to it all, Sinatra to Metallica, and that curve right there, with minor tweaks, covers a good range of music for me. And you're going to hear a lot of examples of music as I get down into these settings, so I can give you an example of what it sounds like. And hopefully this camera will pick up some of these nuances that I'm trying to explain when we get further down into these detailed settings below the equalizer. So moving down, and again, when you come up to equalizer, you're wondering how I set it. For most people, you can try some of the presets. They can be kind of a baseline that you'll want to adjust from there. So if you do listen to a lot of rock, the rock preset is not a bad way to start, but you may want to find yourself adjusting some of those settings ever so slightly, and then using that profile from there on out. For me, I know where I want my range to be. I've been doing this for a long time as a radio DJ, so this is a profile I tend to use on most of my devices, not just the car, but also when I'm out doing shows and things like that. Moving down here to reverb, this is usually the one that people have no idea how to do, no idea, how to tweak it or perfect it and things of that nature, what some of these things actually mean. So let's go through them one by one. You'll see that I do have reverb enabled. Very rarely do I turn off the reverb, and basically what reverb does, it creates dynamic, it creates a realistic or thematic kind of sound to your music. It basically doesn't make it flat anymore. It's not just coming out of the speakers, it's filling that particular area with the richness of the sound. So if you're wondering why my music is boring, dull, flat, you maybe don't have reverb enabled, or maybe it's set improperly and it doesn't allow your music to be very rich. And basically what I mean by that is you'll have some of the background music in the background while you'll have the vocals in front, or at least that's what it will sound like coming through your speakers. And that's what reverb attempts to do. It attempts to make it sound like you're actually at the event, or you're listening to it in the studio while they're recording it. So it's a great tool when used properly. And I'm gonna go through some of these settings here, starting down here with the room size, and that's essentially how big you want your reverb to be. I have it set here for 36 meters squared. I was playing with these settings last night, and if you look at the effect strength, it starts down here at 25 meters squared, and that's, if you do some math and you understand the concept of how big something is, if most Americans don't understand the concept of meters squared. And that's fine. It's kind of I'm not going to get into that lesson, but essentially the smaller it is, the smaller the reverb effect will be for your sound. I have it slightly above the minimum, which is 25 meters squared, which essentially between 25 and 36. Our cabin might actually be smaller than that, so having it on the lowest one is appropriate. You can make it get down to 1200 meters squared and turn it into an arena for all you want. All that's going to do is make your reverb more powerful, and that can also have some side effects. I mean, you're going to get your music to kind of get too wah-wah, too drowned out. It's going to go get too 3D and sound a little off to you. So you don't want to overdo it on the room size. And accordingly, the sound field, which is right below it, which we'll get into in just a second, I have mine just a hair above 25, the next setting up, and that works for me. Moving on to sound field, that's a very similar concept. That's basically how strong do you want your reverb to be, and that's the great thing. This reverb setting right here allows you to really fine-tune how rich, how deep, how wide, how expansive you want your reverb to be. So for me, I have my sound field basically essentially the size of our cab, and I've been between 5 and 7 before. I'll put it at 6 right here. And right now I'm listening to, I'll go back to music here real quick. I've changed the audio. I have a FLAC file of a Spanish singer, Cuban pianist. I found this music in Portugal during my time there when I was working for a radio station out there. And it's a shame you can't. I'm pretty sure the audio on this these speakers aren't picking up, or on the camera rather, aren't picking up the richness of the sound right now. The singer, he's basically in front of all the sound, the vocals in the background, and it's a combination of having a FLAC file, which is uncompressed, and also the reverb settings and the profile that I have on the equalizer. So a combination of all these things really allowed the audio to be richer. So if I turn it up here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, go back to settings while this music's playing at this level. And now what everything's become, it's become kind of flat. It's basically compressed the audio, so it's all basically on the same level. It doesn't separate the piano from the cello in the background. You're not hearing separation of sounds. And as the reverb is enabled again, it starts to separate itself. The singer starts getting in front of the audio, the piano is behind him, and then the background music is behind that. And it's very subtle, and unfortunately, like I said, for these settings right here, it might be hard to pick up or listen to on this camera, and for that I apologize. I don't have my larger camera from work with me this morning. So, but moving forward, so damping effector, I tend to leave that on 0%, and basically damping effector is, you think about what's inside the car, that basically every room has things that will absorb certain frequencies. If you have carpet on your floor, a couch or something like that, the seats here, your door panels, everything is absorbing sound one way or another. When we use the damping factor on reverb, you're essentially determining how much of the high frequency energy is going to be absorbed. So what I have, I have it at 0%, and that's worked well for me. I brought it up to 100. Hasn't really made any impact per se, because for two reasons. This cabin is very small when you consider what reverb is designed to be used for, which are rooms or concerts or things like that. Oh, well, that's pretty much it. This cabin is just so small. And again, well, the second thing rather is these things within the car really aren't absorbing that much audio, because the way that these speakers are all set up throughout the car, they're directed in an appropriate place. I mean, as much as we complain about BMW speakers and how inferior they are as far as producing the sound we want, heavy sound, you know, good mid-bass where we don't need to go out and buy a subwoofer, and I am one of those people, the way they have the sound system arranged doesn't allow that much damping to begin with. So I leave damping factor at 0%. These two at the bottom of the reverb setting, wet and dry signal, will have a huge impact on your sound. And let me explain. I'm going to bring this back up. So hopefully you can hear him clearly. And so what I'm about to do is I'm going to mess with the wet signal. And the wet signal is basically taking your music and making it... it's making it echoey, I guess is the best way to explain it. If you've listened to a lot of music from the 80s, it's got that wah-wah effect. It kind of, well, let's just listen to it and you'll see the impact that wet signal has on your audio. So I hope you heard that difference there. It kind of feels, it begins to make it sound like a concert hall. If you ever had one of those 5-piece audios at the house in the past, in the 90s or early 2000s, where you had all those different effects, you know, concert hall, arena, and they sound very echoey, like you're actually there. That's essentially what wet signal is doing for your reverb. It's essentially creating it's creating a sound where it's intended to sound like it's filling or being played in a concert hall or an arena. You don't want too much of that, because especially when they start singing. Let me go back to some different audio here so you can really hear it over an artist's lyrics. Let's see, Adele will be a great one. Let's see, let's try though. You have to forgive me here. I'm trying to think of a good artist. You know what, we'll just go ahead and go back to Adele here. She'll be a great one. Let's see, like I said, I listen to it all, guys. You'll see Adele here, and then you'll go down and see Avenged Sevenfold just further down. It's variety is the spice of life. Alright, let's go here, Rolling in the Deep. That'll work.
There's a fire starting in my heart, reaching a fever pitch, is bringing me out the dark. Finally, I can see you crystal clear. Go ahead.
So I've given you the two extremes, 10%, 90% here. You can also go to 100%, it just makes it that much more impactful. But what does it sound like in the middle? Obviously the wet signal is less, the impact on the wet signal is less. So the wet and dry make the hugest impact to your reverb settings. And what I've found is that I don't want too much wet signal. I don't want that wah-wah, that concert hall effect, but I do want just a very hint of it, because it adds some depth to my audio. And so I leave it at 10%. I've tried 20% at times, gotten a little bit more than I want as I turn up the volume, where you can hear the background vocals. Those ladies in the background, they have that concert hall wah-wah effect. So I brought it down to 10%, where I get just enough depth, and it's very subtle, but you'll hear it as you turn up the audio. So that's where I've always had it at 10%. Now dry signal is basically bringing your audio. The great thing about it, well, let's see here, what's the best way to explain dry? So dry basically takes your audio and puts it out right in front of you. It pulls that audio and puts it right there in front of you. So if you think, a great visual example is if you're at a concert, the difference between 0% dry and 100% dry is having the main lead singer at the back of the stage without a microphone, as opposed 100% dry signal would be that lead singer being in the crowd singing right next to you with a microphone. That it's just the impact there. And so the closer you get to 100%, the more that audio is just going to be right there in front of you. I've had it most of the time at 90 to 100%. And it really brings Adele, her vocals, it sounds like she's right there next to you, as opposed to when I bring it down to 10%. And if you hear it at 10% now, you have more of the wet signal impact as well. So what I've done is, you saw it started out at 50%, and that's kind of right in the middle ground. And if you heard me when I turned it up to 100%, the volume got ever so slightly louder as well. It really puts that audio, it punches it out there to the front of the sound stage. And I've honestly had it at 100% for a good majority of the time, 100, 90%. I played with it at 50 yesterday, just trying some new things. But I like it here, 10% wet, 90 to 100% dry, and you get some really good audio. Going back up to the other reverb settings, if you look there, 36, the second setting for room size. Sound field, the first or second, no damping factor at all, don't need any of that. So that's how I set up reverb. Moving down to extra loud, give me a second here, I'm going to make sure this is still recording. And we are still recording, thank goodness. Alright, turn this down a little bit. Sorry, Adele, you gotta go away. Alright, so extra loud it's pretty much what you've seen on many other devices. You have the loud, the setting, or the normal setting. I do have this turned on. I've left it as the default, the moderate strength. I have adjusted the max gain a little bit, and it's essentially what it's doing. It's just increasing the impact of the loud setting. So, and then the question is, why don't you just turn it up to extreme? Well, extreme can kind of overmodulate some sounds, kind of take some sounds away, wash some sounds out. Right in the middle is, and again, moderation is the key to any setting. And so that's what I've done. I've made some tweaks ever so slightly. Max output, I can't remember if I've adjusted that. I do have it at 0 dB. Because I want it topped out. I want it to hit basically the top of my meter, and on most meters 0 dB would be close to the overmodulation range. It would definitely be in the red range if you're looking at a audio board. But I'd really have to get my, and you probably didn't hear much of that because again the speakers on the camera, but I can get my audio up all the way when it's at 0 dB and I'm getting no modulation. I'm not getting any blowout, and that's a great thing. That's a combination of the great speakers I have from the Stage 1, and then also the settings within this. I don't have them too high, whereas I turn it up, it's going to become washed out, or it's going to start peaking the speakers, over-modulating the speakers. I have none of that as I turn up the audio, because again I have everything set in moderation. Looking at the master gate is basically the limiter, how far I will let it go. So the output gain I do have below 0. I've turned it up. I believe it was at -3 when I first got it. I can't say for sure. If you haven't adjusted it, you'll probably have the default settings. I've brought it up to -1, just below that max range that I like. You see, you can go past 1. I don't recommend that. You'll get a lot of overmodulation if you let that limiter allow your audio range to get beyond where it should be. And then the threshold as well. How far do I want to limit the threshold? I have it at 0. I have it all the way up. I believe it was 1 or 3 as the default. So again, this just limits the compression, the audio, as it goes out to the signal, as it goes out to the speakers. So these are my settings. This is the way I have it set up. This is the way I prefer. If you're wondering how I have the Infinity Bass Link set up, it's basically all the levels are set towards the middle. If we go back here, you'll see that I have my subwoofer crossover at 80. I want to get most of that. I don't need the 120 hertz crossover. I don't need the subwoofer providing that high of a hertz, because I'm getting that mid bass from my door speakers. Not as rich as, say, a Bose system that overmodulates stuff out of a Nissan or a Mercedes or an Audi. A lot of that stuff is artificially created. It's electronically created, so you're going to get more pump out of your door speakers, which some people prefer. I like a more rich sound. I like a more natural sound, and I do like the bass. The bass obviously is a big component to audio, but I get that from the thump or the big pulse from the subwoofer. That's what I have it back there for. I don't want too much of that coming from the doors. I want every speaker to fulfill what it's designed to do. The tweeters up here are giving me basically the vocals, the high trebles, and then I have my mids in the doors that are providing some of those middle sounds, those middle vocals, and then obviously the mid bass coming from the larger speakers on the front doors and then the rear deck. So the way I have this set up is so that every speaker will produce the sound that it's designed to produce, and it's not overdoing it electronically, getting too much oomph. Whereas as I turn it up, it starts washing out the quality of the sound. I can get this bad boy turned up real loud, and it's never going to impact the quality of the sound. It's going to start hurting my ears because I can get this up very loud, and it will just still sound great. So that's it in a nutshell, guys. Again, the reason I don't mess with this equalizer, to recap, is because again, this equalizer within the SD and the radio setting is only available in those. So if I'm playing music on Songster or Spotify, which I do almost every day, I listen to Spotify the majority of my 1-hour commute. I like being able to make an adjustment on the fly if I'm listening to jazz as compared to Metallica, which I do listen to both on my commute. I'm that crazy, or strange rather. So this stays flat. The subwoofer setting, I have it 22 and it sounds fine. Seriously, if I get it up to 23 or 24, it makes such a significant difference with the intensity of the subwoofer that it's just overpowering the rest of the audio. So for me, with my Infinity Basslink, I found that 22 is where it's just right enough, and it doesn't. I don't have to turn it up to get that good bass sound. Because 21, I have to do that. So 22 is where I found it. Obviously, the fade and balance, I don't mess with at all. And then all of my audio settings beyond the subwoofer level is done within the settings here. Feel free if you have any questions, if you have any additional inputs, just please leave them in the comments. You can also post on the forums. I have this link posted on the E46 Fanatics forums. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know.